EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Tuesday edition of Birds 365, June 18th here. We are officially 35 days away from when the Eagles will report for training camp on July 23rd. Johnny Mac, a little bit of Eagle news. Not much came out yesterday with the camp date or the training camp dates. Tickets going on sale today for anybody who's buying their single game tickets. Get out there to Ticketmaster after the show and buy your tickets. What did we learn yesterday about the training camp and the upcoming schedule for the Philadelphia Eagles?
Not much for those who watched the show religiously. They knew it wasn't official. Now it is official. Tuesday, July 23rd will be reporting day for the players. First practice, therefore, will be the 24th on a Wednesday. Dates and times for all training camp practices are still not available yet. So that'll come a little bit later. But about a week earlier this season than typically, and 5 days or so. And that generally has to do with the opening game being a little bit earlier. So there's the adjustment from that perspective. But it's nice to have a date and know officially when it all kicks off. And we'll be off and running from that standpoint. One open practice, I know a lot of people are upset about that. It keeps getting, when they started this new format of having training camp at the NovaCare complex, they used to have 2 open practices at Lincoln Financial Field. Now it's been whittled down to 1. That'll be Thursday, August 1st at 6:30 p.m. So tickets are on sale for that, as well at Ticketmaster.com. And it doesn't start till 10 a.m. So you can listen to Birds 365 first. For those who miss the old days of training camp, understand they don't have 2-a-days. There's no real need to go outside your facility. They don't have as many practices. It's not like it used to be before. Now certain teams still do it. There's a handful of teams, and they talk about camaraderie and stuff like that. For the Eagles, it doesn't make a ton of sense. The disappointing part for fans is they don't have a complex capable of handling more fans. There are a certain number of fans at each training camp practice, but it's limited to season ticket holders, whatever. Depending on the day, it might be a company they're doing sort of a day with or something of that nature. So there are fans at these practices, but very limited. And that comes down to their facility, which is a little bit outdated. And I've always argued, hey, there's plenty of room down there for those who know the area, but they don't own it. And, the city of Philadelphia is very difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
I'm very surprised that Jeffrey Lurie hasn't moved to the suburbs somewhere and built a facility. That's generally what teams do when you see these high-end facilities around the NFL. It's one area where I think the Eagles could have significant improvement. And some of them, have it's almost like a high school football setup where they have stands and they can have fans for training camp practices and things like that. I envision that down the road somewhere. It's probably going to have to be in the suburbs somewhere.
I wonder if they'll go Jersey or Pennsylvania side for that. A lot of teams go Jersey with the
the Sixers are in Camden now. The Flyers are in Voorhees. But wherever it ends up, I think ultimately it ends up in the suburbs at some point. The one issue, the Eagles facility, as I said, it's very small. It's outdated. When you compare it to the new facilities, we're in Miami, for joint practices. That thing is gorgeous. And it's in Miami Gardens. It's by the stadium, but it's a little bit more suburby there. Minnesota's got a new one, but that's in Eagan, Minnesota. It's probably the best facility. The Cowboys are right there as well. And there's obviously the star. You've probably seen it on TV. It's unbelievable. And ironically, they leave for training camp because they're lunatics. I don't know what Jerry Jones does and why he does the things he does. The Jets even were up there, and their facility is phenomenal, and that's in Florham Park, New Jersey. So, the Eagles probably need to upgrade their facilities pretty quickly. And we'll see how that shakes out in the upcoming years.
Well, good to have the dates at least, so we know that they're going to be 35 days away until they report at least to the facility, July 23rd, and then their first practice will be 36 days away on July 24th. So good stuff there. And then, as John mentioned, the open practice August 1st. So we'll see if any of our fans head down there for the open practice. If you guys plan on going to that, leave us in the chat. I want to welcome everybody in this morning. Slagger, Twiz, Crawley, Philly Bears and Birds and Beers. I love that. Bruce Banner, Lee, South Jersey, Cody K. What's up, everybody? We appreciate you guys being here. We have a good show planned today. We got Bill Colarulo, the married man, the newly married man. Bill Colarulo will join us.
His whole life has changed since the last time we saw him.
In about 10 minutes. So we'll have Billy C coming up at 8:20. And then a first-time guest coming up on Birds 365 in the hour number 2. Thomas Mott. If you guys are on YouTube and I know a lot of you are in the chat, obviously you're watching this show on YouTube. He's a big Eagles YouTuber. He's got a big Eagles channel, Thomas Mott Show. He does great work on his channel, over 50,000 subscribers on there. So he does tremendous work. I'm excited to talk to him for the first time ever on Birds 365. So we'll welcome Thomas Mott to the show. Good stuff planned. Johnny Mac, we teased something. Well, not teased it, but we brought it up a little bit yesterday. When we were talking to Jeff Kerr about the linebackers. I don't want to go into the Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts route yet. We're going to talk about that with Bill, obviously, because we haven't had a chance to talk to him. Do you think they can overcome this linebacker group? There's a big stat out there where 15 of the last 20 teams in the Super Bowl have top 10 defenses. And, everybody's putting a lot of onus on Vic Fangio to turn this defense around. What do you make of the linebacker group? Do you think it's a position that this defense can live through? We brought up the ranking yesterday from Michael Clay, I believe it was, on ESPN. 30th out of 32. So not highly regarded, at least by Michael Clay.
Yeah, but that way, I did notice because I retweeted that because I saw somebody else tweeted it. And I like Mike, and he's good. And that was pre-minicamp, and I'm partially joking. But, because there was so much hype on Devin White and Zach Bond coming out of minicamp in pajamas by their own, that was Bobby King, their own position coach, saying that. So it's not all that meaningful, but, maybe it bumps up a couple spots. I don't know, because of the hype of minicamp. But, yeah, on paper, it's not a good group. It really isn't. And he had him 30th of 32nd. I talk all the time. It's list season. If you don't like one list, go to the next one. But I guarantee every linebacker list you see, the Eagles aren't going to be near the top of it. So if you're looking for that, you're going to be tired, because you're going to be racing from list to list and trying to find somebody who thinks this group is top tier. And if you're not wearing Eagles colored glasses, you're not going to find it. It is on paper. It is among the worst group in the NFL. You can argue it's the worst group in the NFL. And to me, I think where I differ from most people is everybody's hyped up about Devin White because of the pedigree. The ceiling with this group remains Nakobe Dean turning into a good player. That's where the ceiling is. And are you comfortable with that? I don't know why anybody would be comfortable with it, but I think if you're talking about best case scenarios for the Philadelphia Eagles, that's the best case scenario. Because we've seen enough of Devin White. I'm sorry.
Have we seen
80 games? What's that?
Have we seen anything out of Nakobe Dean, though, to suggest that he has an upside that we're hoping?
No,
Yeah, I'm not even
that's why I said I'm not necessarily. I'm saying I'm not necessarily comfortable with it, but again, I think most people are focused on Devin White. What you have with Devin White is a tremendously large sample size in a different city. 84 NFL games. Is the light coming on in 85?
Right.
I find that hard to believe. Could he be a little bit better? Sure. But I don't think you're getting this complete 180 turnaround. With Nakobe Dean, much of it is unknown. You're talking about 5 games, essentially, where he didn't look great in those 5 games where he was healthy. But it's only 5 games. So to me, there's still some room for hopefully becoming what the Eagles thought he might become when they drafted him. That still exists. And then if you're looking down the road, you might want to bring Jeremiah Trotter Jr. into the mix. But again, that's down the road. We talked about those day 3 picks a lot, those 5th round picks a lot, and already it's tempered down because of they were started out, no surprise. They're bringing in Trevor Keegan even more so than Trot. I mean, people are like, I think Trevor Keegan might push Tyler Steen. I mean, they're bringing in Max Sharping to push Tyler Steen, but talking about moving Mekhi Becton to push Tyler Steen. And that it doesn't even count Matt Hennessy. I mean, it ain't going to be Trevor Keegan. And the same thing with Trot starting on the 3rd team. It's gonna take a while, but that could be something to revisit down the road. But if you're talking about the 3 guys, and even if you want to throw Oren Burks in there, so Devin White, Nakobe Dean, Zach Ball, and Oren Burks, with that group, that's the group that's going to be the game day guys, most likely. The upside there is still Nakobe Dean.
Yeah, so we'll see how it plays out. How much does this Vic Fangio defense lend to? I don't want to say blend them in because they're a big part of any defense, the linebacker group. But I mean, we've talked a lot about the defensive backs stepping up, or at least having an improved year from what they were last year. Defensive line has some questions with no Fletcher Cox, no Hassan Reddick, but does Vic Fangio's system and his scheme and what he does allow linebacker play to be so poor? And what I mean is, like, I know they're not running a 3-4. We've talked about it, but let's just say it is a 3-4. When you have that type of scheme, you need good linebackers for your defense to work. Does this scheme have that type of philosophy?
Well, I hate that terminology. I mean, if you're talking about a 3-4 in the old days and people thinking about impactful 3-4 defenses, and they need big time they're talking about the edge rushers. They're talking about the pass rushers mostly. And that's Bryce Huff, that's Josh Sweat, that's Nolan Smith, and those guys. When you're talking about the off-ball linebackers, and those are the stack linebackers, the guys off the line of scrimmage, everybody needs a good middle linebacker, at least to a certain degree, even in the modern game. And then a lot of teams don't even use a second linebacker as a full-time player anymore. That's how drastically things are shaping. So I think you already saw it with Vic in the mini camp and playing Quinyon Mitchell and dime. He was playing the extra linebacker slot. Can you get away with that from a coverage standpoint? Certainly, you're better. Are other teams finally going to take advantage of that and saying, this guy's got Quinyon Mitchell playing linebacker? Let's run the football. Let's run it down their throats. I don't know. We'll see how other teams adjust. I know this. If I'm playing the Philadelphia Eagles in 2024 and I'm the opposition, I'm going to attack the middle of the field. until they prove they can stop it.
Well, that's where Jordan Davis is going to come into play on that front line, right?
Well, I'm not talking about the running game. I'm talking about in
it.
the passing game. I'm going to attack the middle of the field and force those linebackers to cover people. And we'll see if they can hold up.
I think Devin White, doesn't he lend to being somewhat of a better coverage guy because of his athletic abilities versus an instinctual middle linebacker that's plugging gaps and,
I always bring up Jack Del Rio because Jack couldn't run a lick and turned into a Pro Bowl linebacker. And especially when you're talking about zone coverage schemes, which Vic is predominantly, those instincts mean more than the ability to run a 4.45 at 245 pounds. You got to be in the right spot. You got to be able to understand, have the football IQ to pass off guys when you're supposed to pass them off, from controlling guys from dropping, more of a 4-3. Brian Urlacher and Derek Brooks are, to me, the two best coverage linebackers of, probably the pre-era. And those are both cover two guys, and they could carry people down the field better than just about anybody else. And they're both in the Hall of Fame because of it. Do the Eagles have that player athletically? And I bring up there's a player named Dontarius Thomas. You can look him up. He was from Auburn. He ran a 4.4, and they were trying to replace Jack Del Rio with this kid because Jack was getting older. And they said, well, he's such a great athlete. He had no freaking clue in coverage. None. Zero. And he was terrible. So athleticism can be a big part of it if you're Derek Brooks, but you got to have the football IQ and the instincts as well. How
much does the safeties help us? Stephen McKell in the chat brings up a point about CJ being back, which could deter teams from throwing to the middle. I mean, got to think they can separate that, but how much does that help that middle of the defense there?
Well, you're not going to change your whole philosophy by, moving CJ to make up for the deficiencies of the linebackers in coverage. You got to play your scheme. If it's cover 3, it's cover 3, or in Vic's case, cover 9. It's not like, oh, it's cover 3, but CJ make up for this guy, or, because CJ's a good coverage player. He is a good coverage player, but, other teams are going to know what Vic is trying to do, whether it's quarters or that cover 3 uses. And the safety's got to be in Reed Blankenship as well. They have a certain responsibility. And that, if that changes because you're trying to make up for the deficiencies of Devin White or Nakobe Dean in coverage, it's going to get ugly pretty quickly. I will say that.
We'll see how it all plays out. Coming up next, our man, Billy C., the married man, Bill Colarulo, is coming up next. Before I go to break, I want to bring up our buddy, Terry Hayes. Terry, thank you for the super chat, man. What a great comment this is. Love the show. I watch all of JAKIB Sports every day. I work nights, so I'm usually asleep during big sales, but I listen to it every night. Keep it up. Terry, thank you, sir. We appreciate, if you're a man, I think you're a man. Terry, we appreciate that very much. That's a very nice message. And we appreciate your support of the network. So good stuff there, Terry Hayes. We appreciate that very much. Let's get to our first commercial break. Coming up next, I see him in the chat already, Bill Colarulo. We'll talk to Bill after his honeymoon in Aruba. The married man coming up next. Stay tuned, everybody, on Birds 365. Bill Sage coming up next.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood days.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Tuesday's edition of Birds 365. Joined now by Bill Colarulo, the married man. What's going on, Bill?
Yeah.
What's going on, gentlemen?
How you doing, Bill? How was it? Tell us. You look different. You look.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
It was great. It was a good wedding, great trip. I'm happy to be back, though. I mean, as much fun as we had, my wife and I both are creatures of habit. So 7 days away, I'm ready to get home.
All right. Nice.
But
I heard you checked in with Jacheco from your honeymoon. Come on. Stop doing that. You got to have better things to do.
Yeah, we had Jacheco on. He's like, yeah, I heard from Bill Colarulo. He's in Aruba asking me about the off-season camp. I'm like, oh, my goodness, Bill.
Well, I couldn't stay away. And then I'm watching the press conferences from Aruba. And I know this has been beaten to talk about beating a dead horse with Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni, but I was watching it live on the beach, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Come on, man. Just say something.
Yeah.
Say something nice. Why are you giving
we're
us
we're gonna resuscitate that horse and bring it up because we know you want to talk about it. It came out that from our buddy Jeff McMullen that key members, key figures in the Eagles organization were disappointed by the way Jalen handled that. And my argument, well, why wouldn't they be? Because it was so easy. It was a layup. Just say something nice and move on. That to me is the biggest problem with it. What is Bill Colarulo's take?
The exact same one. I'm sitting there, literally, I'm watching it on my honeymoon on the beach, and I'm thinking, okay, here comes a softball question. I mean, it was a softball question. It would have been so easy to just say, it shows how committed he is to winning, or he's willing to do anything to get this team to its ultimate goal. Done. You didn't have to say much. Just give something positive and move on. And look, Jalen Hurts is a smart guy. And the Eagles media team, they had him prepared for a question like that. That's why, to me, it just was, how did you not have a response already prepared? And I know he doesn't like to say a lot, and he tries to avoid saying things that are going to result in us doing exactly this. But by not saying anything, now we have a month and a half until we talk to anyone at the Eagles again. And this is all we can sink our teeth into. So I hated it. And it doesn't surprise me that people inside the Eagles organization weren't happy with it for that very reason. You knew by not saying anything or by, pausing. And it just, to me, and I've been a supporter of Sirianni. You know that. I've battled for him. I don't think he should have been fired. But everything we heard during the season last year offseason was that this organization wanted Jalen Hurts to be a better leader this year. To me, that wasn't showing that you're a better leader by not reading the room, understanding the way the Philly media works, whether we're right or not. I know we can be tough. Say something, man. I mean, I was freaking out. I actually said it to my wife on the beach. I said, you got to be kidding me. And then I rewinded it and played it for her. And she's like, oh, I can't stand him in press conferences.
It's an unforced error, is how I described it, to use a tennis term. Unforced error. And for those people that are mad at us, the Philly media, what are we supposed to do? We didn't create this.
Yeah,
the quarterback created this.
Yeah, we're getting killed. I've seen it. They were talking about it on the Fanatics morning show today, and I see people coming at them on Twitter. You Philly media just trying to stir controversy. This is what they gave us. I mean, this is why I think they were so angry inside the organization. This isn't like the middle of the season where the next day you get the team again and they're able to correct whatever was said. There's a month and a half now of no news coming out of the NovaCare complex, and the last thing we're left with is that. Bothered me.
Well, Bill, now it looks like the relationship between the head coach and quarterback isn't great. Let's just say for a second it is. Maybe it's not. Maybe this is way overblown and they're on fine terms. If it's not, how far can this team go? You've been a guy that's been high on the Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts combination. I remember when you did your list of the best coach quarterback duos in the NFC. How far can this team go if the relationship between the coach and the quarterback is fractured?
If they win early, I think it will heal all, right? Winning cures all. I think if they can come out and they don't hit a lot of controversy or adversity early, I think they'll be okay. Where this can rear its ugly head is if things don't come out to a hot start, they start to maybe lose a couple of games, then I think it can become a bigger problem than we want it to be. But I don't think it's a requirement. I do think if Kellen Moore and Jalen Hurts have a good relationship and the offense is firing on all cylinders and Vic Fangio is running the defense and they don't hit a lot of adversity this season, then I don't think we'll be talking about this come September, October. But if things aren't firing on all cylinders right away, they lose a couple of games early, I think the noise is going to be really loud and we're all going to be talking about the June 10th or whatever the hell it was press conference that Jalen Hurts gave.
One thing Jalen had no problem getting out, Bill, was the idea that the offense is 95% new. And he's very intentional. And that's why I think there's also a problem with his lack of comments with Nick Sirianni. He's generally very, on point, and he gets across what he wants to get across. That 95% to me was an attempt to spin just how bad the first team offense looked in minicamp, which is meaningless. I'll be the first to say it. I say it all the time. It's not going to matter. But, it's been a struggle. And I bring that up to bring up, should we expect the greatest show on turf week 1 in Brazil against Green Bay? I think there's going to be some growing pains and people should prepare themselves.
Yeah, I'm with you. One on Jalen Hurts. I do think him saying it was 95% new was because there's probably a little bit of frustration. Look, we know this is his 10th play caller in the last 9 years. Now he's learning a new offense again. And I do think he was probably a little bit frustrated at minicamp. But I've been preaching this for a couple of months now. Patience to start the season, because I don't expect them to come out. It's possible, but I don't expect them to be firing on all cylinders in week 1 when you are putting that much of a new offense into place. I think they'll get there. I think they're good enough with the weapons they have. I think the offensive line actually has the potential to be better than it was last season, even losing Jason Kelce.
Wow, that's a big statement right there.
I think it has the potential. I'm not saying it will happen, but if you look at the left side of the line, Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, I don't think we've seen their ceiling yet. So I'm expecting them to be better this year than we even saw last year. I think Cam Jurgens at center, he's not going to be Jason Kelce. No one will be. But I think he's going to be solid at center. And I'm hopeful that you're going to get better right guard play, whether it's Tyler Steen in his second season, whether it's Mekhi Becton transitioning over. I think you'll get better right guard play than you got last year with Cam Jurgens. I thought it was up and down, and then you still have Lane Johnson. So if all those things happen, and I know it's an if, I think the offensive line can actually be better. Not guaranteeing it, but it's possible. So when you factor that into the equation, along with all the weapons that they have, I do think the offense will be very good. I just agree with John. I think it's going to take some time to get there. I don't know if you'll see it right away. I think there will be some growing pains. And I think we need to be patient because, like I just said, if adversity starts to hit early and they're not firing on all cylinders, the noise is going to be so loud, especially all the people who didn't want to see Sirianni come back. God forbid they go into that bye week 1-3.
Oh,
if you're frustrated with the Philly media now, it's going to be real ugly come week 5.
Yeah, and I don't even think they'll be mad at us at that point. I think they'll be so mad at the team and everything that they'll be understanding what's going on. Bill, I want to ask you, we haven't had you on in a couple of weeks, so we haven't really had a chance to talk to you about the emerging young cornerbacks who seem to be dominating the spring headlines. This was prior to Jalen botching the question, which has now sent us into a tailspin. But what do you make of all the young cornerbacks stepping up? Seems like it could be an improved secondary. A lot of young guys, a lot of unproven guys, but it certainly seems like a lot of them are ready to take a next step forward. How do you see it?
Yeah, I'm excited. And going into the draft, I was the one saying, look, I don't want to see them trade up to take a corner in the first round because I thought the secondary was better than some other positions on the defensive side of the football, mainly because I was so excited about Kelee Ringo in year 2. And I kept saying, don't rule him out as potentially being a starter. Well, then Quinyon Mitchell falls to them, which I'm happy they took him. I think that was a smart move. But then there were people saying he's going to be the starter week 1. And again, I was preaching patience, saying don't rule out Kelee Ringo. This is a guy who, number one, is younger than Quinyon Mitchell. People forget how young Kelee actually was when they drafted him. You knew you were getting a raw player, but they obviously liked him enough to trade a 3rd-round pick to move up into the 4th round to take Kelee. And he's got all of the attributes you want. He's big. He's fast. He's strong. He's athletic as hell. So I was excited to see him in year 2. And then we were excited about Isaiah Rodgers, but it was, well, what can you expect from a guy who's been off for a year? And from all accounts from minicamp, he looks like he's not rusty either. So now you factor those two guys into the equation with the young rookies, Quinyon and Cooper DeJean, and you still have Darius Slay. And I'm not ruling out Avonte Maddox. I know 13 games in 2 seasons, but if he can stay healthy, another big if, this secondary group, it could be actually a strength on this team if they all stay healthy. Because Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, we've talked about this before, I think, John.
Yeah.
He's another player who has to stay healthy. But if all those things happen, could be very good. But I'm really excited to see Kelee Ringo this year. That's the one player that I'm probably most excited about on the defense.
Yeah, I'm with you with Ringo. I love Ringo's upside as a player. You and I talked about that. I mean, there's a guy, if he probably stayed in college another year, he might have been a 1st-round pick. I mean, because, he's going to have success almost at Georgia. It could go bad. I mean, Eli Ricks is a guy we're not talking about. I just wrote about him on Sports Illustrated because, when that vacuum happens and Ringo looks good and Rodgers looks good and Mitchell looks good, DeJean looks good, all of a sudden, where does Eli Ricks fit? But it's a nice problem to have. It's a first world problem. It's a rich man's problem. And that's considering where the Eagles were last season. It's pretty amazing how Howie Roseman has turned over that cornerback room and brought in talent. Now, same thing I said with the offense, though, Bill. These guys are young. There's probably going to be hiccups. But it's a nice position to be in. And who knows? Maybe you get those startup costs out of the way early in the season, late in the season. It gets better. I think that's your hope. And Reed Blankenship, there's the one guy. And I know you got to run, so I'll end it at Bill Colarulo because you're going to be on at 10 a.m. over
I was supposed to have the day off today, but they just called me. So
they just called you. So you're doing double duty. But Reed Blankenship, there's a guy, I don't know, he can just play. And for whatever reason, not for whatever reason, because he was undrafted, I went through this with TJ Edwards. At some point, you got to say, all right, he was undrafted. They missed. He can play. That's where I am with Reed Blankenship. Where are you?
I'm excited to see what he does in year 3, but he's another guy that we haven't seen play a 17-game season. His first 2 years, he didn't play all 17 games either. So, yeah, I want to see him improve because I think there were some up and downs in his first 2 seasons, which you expect from an undrafted rookie. But again, health. I want to see him do it for a 17-game season. But I will say, when I look overall at this defense, and again, just like when I talked about the offensive line, there's a lot of ifs. But I think this defense has a lot higher upside than what you saw last year. Because you looked at the safety room last year, and we were relying on guys like Justin Evans and Terrell Edmonds. You know, even the cornerbacks. Yes, you were excited. Most people didn't see the James Bradbury drop-off coming, but you weren't expecting Slay and Bradbury to elevate their game. You were just hoping that they would be the same players they were in 2022, where now you have players where, wow, we haven't seen their ceiling yet. Same thing at linebacker. You brought in Nick Morrow last year. You knew at best what you were getting from Nick Morrow. Well, now you got Devin White. I'm not sold on Devin White yet, but the upside is there. So that's the one thing I'm excited about with the defense is I think they have more upside. And Reed Blankenship is a guy where, yeah, in year 3, I'm hoping to see him really take that leap. But I went and looked at some of the Super Bowl teams over the last 10 seasons. I actually did a video on this on my Instagram yesterday. The last 20 teams to make a Super Bowl, 15 of them had a top 10 defense. And you look at the Philadelphia Eagles throughout their franchise history, they've never been to a Super Bowl not having a top 7 defense. So I look at this defense and I'm like, man, is it realistic, though, even with Vic Fangio and with these new pieces, that they could go from 30 to top 10, top 7? And I don't
look
know
at it this way. They went from top 2 or top 3 to bottom 5 in 1 year. So why
they
can't
were
you
number
do the
2
opposite?
in yards. They went down to 26, but they were number 7 in points. They dropped all the way to 30.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about points.
They were 31st, I think, in pass defense, and they were number 1 the year
before.
They went 1 to 31 in pass defense. So why can't you do the opposite?
So, well, I went a little further, John, and I dug deeper, and I was like, well, what has Vic Fangio done as defensive coordinator over that same span? So in the last 10 years, he's been a head coach or a DC 9 times because that 1 year he was just a consultant here in Philly. It's feast or famine, man. 5 out of the 9, top 10. 4 out of the 9, bottom 20. Yeah. So curious to see. And then I know there's people out there, well, look what he did a couple years into being the DC. Well, we don't have a couple of years. It's got to be his first year here in Philadelphia. He's got to turn this defense around because as good as the offense I think can be, we went into last year saying the offense is going to be so good, it doesn't matter that they let both their linebackers and both their starting safeties walk. Offense is going to be so good. Didn't really work out for us.
Yeah, and what's the elephant in the room here? Who were the 2 best defensive players in the Philadelphia Eagles last year?
Hassan Reddick, who's gone. And I would say Darius Slay would be my other one.
I would say Fletcher Cox. So Fletcher Cox is
Cox.
gone.
Yeah, that Fletcher Cox.
And Hassan Reddick is gone. And we need to make a catastrophic jump up, counting on a lot of young guys. Look, I'm optimistic about the young guys. I'm pretty excited about all of them. But boy, this is a big ask when you really break it down.
And you talk about Fletcher Cox, and I've said this on the air before. I know it's not fair sometimes to ask that much of a year 2 player. Jalen Carter has to replace Fletcher Cox. I'm not asking Cam Jurgens to replace Jason Kelce. There's only one Jason Kelce. But I think Jalen Carter, yes, sorry, year 2, you have to replace an Eagles legend in Fletcher Cox. He needs to be that good this season, I think, for that defense to be able to get to the potential that I think they can. Because if Jalen Carter can dominate on the interior, you both know this. You create interior pressure in the NFL, you can disrupt a lot of opposing offenses, and that can have a ripple effect throughout the entire defense.
Yeah, it makes life easier in that young secondary.
Absolutely.
Big time.
Yeah, it's a big part of it. At Bill Colarulo on X, make sure you follow Bill there. Listen to him today. What are we saying? 10 a.m. Is that when you're going to be?
Yeah, I'll be on 10 to 2 today with with Bob Cooney. Not sure what's on the agenda because, like I said, I just got the text saying, "Hey, can you get here to the station?" So as soon as I get off the air, I got to run up to Bala Kenwood. So
all right, buddy, be careful. You'll make it. Bob Cooney can handle 10 minutes, so even if you're late, but safe travels over there. And we're going to be listening to great Bill Colarulo, a married man now.
Married man.
Congratulations.
And we're almost there. They just released it. When do the Eagles report?
July 23rd.
We're almost there, man. The dog days of summer.
July 24th, yeah.
But our fighting Phils are making it a little bit easier to get through.
Yeah, I saw you were down at the game the other night. How was that?
Oh, I was there last night. It was good to have them back home, and I think they were happy to be back home, weren't they?
They definitely were.
My God.
They needed it. They went on a little bit of a slide there on the road. But all right, Bill, thanks for checking in.
Appreciate you, boys.
We'll talk to you next week. Have a good show.
Thanks, Bill.
See you next week. Thanks.
See you, man. There's Bill Colarulo joining us on Birds 365. Good to talk to Bill again. It was good to hear his take on the Jalen and Nick stuff. Normally, he's a good voice of reason, so good to talk to him about that. We'll go to a commercial break. Johnny Mac and I will come back. We got now a good segment here. Between we'll have Thomas Mott, as I mentioned, in hour number 2, a first-time guest on Birds 365. By the way, John, we didn't even give the shout this morning. That's my fault. Show number 800, everybody.
800, yeah. That's my fault. I was talking about it.
Yeah, I know. When I'm the host, I got to come in here hot and say, welcome into the 800th edition of Birds 365. So thanks, everybody in the chat. Thank you, Johnny Mac. 800 shows on 800. Birds 365. That's
million plus podcast downloads, I'm told. Yeah. So there
well over that now. I mean, well over 1 million on the podcast. We got probably well over 5 to 10 million on the YouTube channel. I would say it's north of 10 million, but I'd have to go back and look. I think we have 35 or 40 million views on the whole channel. Birds 365 has been obviously a massive part of that. So pretty good stuff. Thanks everybody in the chat for making the show grow and for keeping it all possible. So we appreciate all you. We'll hit a commercial break. Coming up next, Johnny Mac and I will have a full segment to go, and then we'll talk to Thomas Mott in hour number 2. So stay tuned, everybody, on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Up. And go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody. Tuesday edition of Birds 365. Got a good show, a good rest of the show planned, so we'll get into that. I want to bring up a comment from our buddy Miguel Laura. I love Miguel. I've been talking to Miguel for a couple years now. Good morning, fellas. Once again, I've been listening to JAKIB Sports for the last 3 years. All my respects to you guys that bring us fans an insight at everything Eagles related. Miguel, we appreciate that. That comment. So we thank you very much for being here. You guys make the shows possible, so we do appreciate that. Johnny Mac, I want to keep it defensive, and we have a defensive theme going today. We started off talking about linebackers. I want to ask you about the pass rush. I just brought it up a little bit with Bill. The two best guys I thought on the defense last year were Hassan Reddick and Fletcher Cox. They were a big part of the pass rush. They're gone. How do we replace that type of production? And do we have the personnel to replace that production? Even if Jalen Carter exceeds expectations this year, are we going to be able to fill the holes that are left on this defense to be able to improve?
Well, the pass rush, I would argue last season was tremendously disappointing.
Yeah, it was.
Of course, coming off the 2022 season, which was historic, and there was going to be a regression to the mean, which I talked about all the time. Even if Gannon was back, even if they brought back the exact same defense, it was gonna regress. You're not going to get 70 sacks. So that was a special season. But they weren't good as a whole. And especially down the stretch. We always talk about the offense, but the defense was arguably even worse. And part of that was the pass rush. And I know the Eagles themselves were very disappointed with the defensive front down the stretch, mainly because they knew they had issues from a talent perspective and injury perspective and down season perspective from James Bradbury. By that point in the secondary, they knew there were issues. But that front was supposed to be the strength and really good, and they really weren't for that stretch of games anyway. And that includes everybody from Hassan Reddick on down. I would argue to the point, Jalen Carter was already better than Fletcher Cox last year. Already. Now, that is not a detriment to Fletcher because I think Fletcher played well. It's just that's the kind of upside Jalen Carter has. For whatever reason, people ignore the kind of rookie season he had. Was it a disappointment that he didn't sustain it for 17 games? Yes, and that's the conditioning part of it. That also we're talking about with Jordan Davis as well. So that part's got to get better. But he was really stinking good. Overall,
Do you put any real quick? Sorry to cut you off, but do you put any of that drop off on the coordinator change, or do you think it's all on the conditioning? Just because I wonder, there's
some of it. Some of it. One of the issues inside the building was guys freelancing, guys going off script. You got to be very disciplined in the pass rush. Something Jim Schwartz would talk about all the time, and they weren't very disciplined, and guys were going into business for their own. And a lot of that was the kick in the ass to Reddick out the door, which I think was unfair. He was a part of it, but so was Jalen Carter, so was Josh Sweat. Everybody was a part of it. And that's kind of what happens when you start losing and guys are turning to, I better get mine. In the case of, I think it became a bigger deal in the case of Hassan because you see today, even with the Jets, he's trying to get a new contract. He's trying to get $25 million a year. And how do you get $25 million a year if you're an edge rusher? Well, you got to get sacks. And it's one of those things that drives me nuts because in between the contracts, everybody in the NFL talks with the proper context. pressures mean more consistently, but they don't pay for pressures. They pay per sacks, which, if you think about it, is the dumbest thing possible. It's all of a sudden like you turn into a fan when you're negotiating contracts. When really is you just use the leverage. Well, we'd like to give you 25 million, but come on, you went from 19 and a half sacks to 11 sacks. You didn't get any in the final whatever games it was. And you use that as leverage, which is part of the dirty part of the NFL, you know. But, you know, and that wasn't just Hassan, it was everybody, including Jalen Carter. But overall, when you ask who are the best defensive players on the Eagles last season, you can make a strong argument that Jalen Carter was number one as a rookie. A very strong argument.
Yeah, you really can. I mean, and that's where I really of all the young team or all the young players that we're talking about, that we've talked about all summer long, that we will continue to talk about, Jalen Carter is the one I really don't have worries with from a playing perspective. Right? There's injuries and there's conditioning and there's all those things, but from a talent perspective, and then not only just having talent, because Devin White has talent, but being able to apply your talent to the game, being able to make a difference. Jalen Carter, I have almost no questions on him. I think he's going to be a great player. Now we'll see. Obviously, I'm not just because I think that doesn't mean that that's going to be the case. But you are right. I mean, I guess so. He does make up for it a lot. How about Bryce Huff though, Johnny Mac? I mean, he's the guy who's going to be replacing Hassan Reddick. Nolan Smith is a part of that equation too. What do we need to get? What do we need to see from those two guys to be able to cover the gap there?
Well, you want to see Bryce. I mean, that's, you know, the big story really of this offseason from a defensive perspective is the projection of Bryce Huff on this defense. And if he turns what he did last year with the Jets as a pass rusher and 480 snaps into the same type of production over 800 plus, it's going to be a home run for Howie Roseman. Because he gets younger, you know, Bryce is 26. He just turned 26. Hassan's going to turn 30 in September. You're cheaper. Hassan isn't going to play for the 17 million or so they gave Bryce Huff. And you have a longer shelf life. Part of that is age, but part of it's tread. Hassan Reddick has played a boatload of snaps. Really, not only his 2 years in Philadelphia, but dating back to, and I was just looking at this, he's only played less snaps than Bryce Huff played last year once in his career as a rookie in Arizona when he was an all-ball linebacker. He's always over 800, always. He's very durable. So a lot of people talk about the tread with running backs in certain positions. They don't talk about it at edge rusher. The Eagles made a deep playoff run to the Super Bowl, so there was more. He had a career high in snaps last year. I think that factors into it as well. Another dirty part of the NFL is, you know, they rode Hassan Reddick hard over these past two seasons, the Eagles, and they know it.
Yeah.
They know it better than anybody. And that, make no mistake, that's part of their projection as well, that we ran this guy into the ground. And how much longer is he going to have that level of production after what we did to him? They know that better than anybody. Look at DeMarco Murray coming to the Eagles from the Cowboys. DeMarco Murray was great on the Cowboys. They ran him into the ground. I think he had 450 touches. It was outrageous. And he fell off a cliff here.
That's definitely a part of it. That's the business of the NFL that a lot of people don't, you know, when you're a fan, you don't think about it. You do, but you don't. It's not top of mind. It certainly is a tough part of the business. John, what's your expectation for Nolan Smith this year?
He better be a meaningful producer in a rotational way. You know, he's got to be a solid, however you want to view Brandon Graham, and I kind of view it a little counterintuitively. Like, I'm like, Brandon said that, has been consistent. This is it. He's not changing his mind. So I think over the past few seasons, the Eagles have been very cognizant to keep him on a pitch count. He's been very effective in the snaps he's played. Last year, he played 427 snaps. Well, this is it. So I think everyone, he's going to go down. I'm the opposite. He's going to go up. You got nothing to save him for. So I think Brandon's going to be effective as that third guy.
I think he can last that long, though, on a bigger pitch count. I mean, he is 35.
He's in great shape. He's got more energy than anybody I've ever met in my life. He's got more energy than every stinking 22 and 23-year-old on that team. Now, he admits sometimes you got to manufacture it at his age, but he keeps himself in great shape. I see no evidence that he's looking to get off the field. There's a guy who practices. He doesn't even want maintenance days. Everybody's like, well, you got to have maintenance. When Doug brought in the maintenance day, he's like, nah, don't worry about me. I'll go practice. Yeah, I have a lot of trust in Brandon Graham that whatever the number is, that he's going to be effective in those snaps. And I think they might go up. We'll see how it shakes. But, a lot of that is dependent on Nolan Smith. If Nolan plays really well, they might go down. They might go down.
Right, because you have a player that's playing good enough to keep him off the field.
Yeah, and that's fine. But, if that's not the case, Nolan's at least got to be able to be a fourth rotational rusher.
How about Josh Sweat? He's the one guy I haven't asked you about on that pass rush. I mean,
he's
what's
got
he going to do this year? I thought he was pretty underwhelming last year. Just seems to be such an inconsistent player, John. I remember when they drafted him, or after, and you've been talking about Josh for a while. He's like your prototypical edge rusher in the NFL from a size perspective and a build perspective and those stuff. I just don't feel he's ever lived up to the expectation or the hype around him.
Well, I don't, if you want to go back, he's like the Eli Ricks of pass rushers coming out of high school, but he suffered, I think he was the number one recruit in the entire country. But then he suffered a catastrophic injury at the end of his high school career. So he's always been battling. Well, that's one thing about Josh, is they've always had him on the pitch count because of that injury. And last year he finally convinced them that, you don't have to worry about it anymore. And he played a career high in snaps, and he's another guy. He was up well into the 800s, maybe might have been 900. I'll look it up as I'm talking, but that was way above his previous high, and he's very similar. I think if you look at last year, he was great early, he was bad late. Another guy. Yeah. It was 875.
That's a lot of snaps.
Yeah. And you probably want that to come down. And that is big on Nolan Smith as well. So you got to have a better rotation. You got to have a deeper rotation. And Nolan Smith's going to be a big part of that. And Bryce Huff playing more. But yeah, you got to get Huff up. You got to get Sweat down. Brandon's dependent on other guys stepping up. And then who knows, if you want to cross your fingers and say, I think everybody looks at Alex Hunt and says, he's a developmental project, and the Eagles have sort of winked, he's a developmental project, but maybe he's a natural. Maybe he comes in and beats people because of his athleticism. You never know. But they need their fourth and fifth edge rushers to play better, and that's mainly going to be Nolan Smith.
Yeah. Well, John, give me your perspective because I think sometimes I might cloud this with my own Eagle fandom and stuff. I'm hard on Nolan Smith right now just because I'm like, this guy got drafted in the first round. He really did nothing. I know he was going through injury. I'm expecting him to, you need to play a big part on this defense this year. They got rid of Hassan Reddick. Like, it's your time to shine, young man. You were a first round draft pick. Maybe I'm hard on him, but I also feel like I'm not. It's like you're a first round pick. You have to produce. What's your expectation or what's your realistic look at what to expect from him if you're not an Eagle fan, let's say?
Well, I don't think it. I'm surprised how quickly a number of people have given up on him.
Oh, I haven't given up on him. I just think it's time for him to show up.
I mean, it's his second season. He was the 30th overall pick. It's funny. We talk about it all the time, those first round picks. I mean, if he were 33, it'd be a different narrative. Give him time to grow, but he was 30th, so he's a first round pick. He was hurt last year, even though he doesn't like to talk about it, but he played through it. That's a positive. He played every single game. Mainly, more on special teams. He had 200 or so defensive snaps. He got better as he got late in the season. Howie talked about the wild card game. He was one of the few guys who showed any juice in the wild card game. He's gotten a little bit bigger, which I think was a key. A little bit stronger. He fixed the shoulder, hopefully, with a surgical procedure. He still is a sub 4.4 guy, which as a pass rusher is unbelievable. So I wouldn't give up on Nolan Smith, but I'm with you. He's got to prove it. And the ironic thing is, everybody thinks he's undersized and he's terrible against the run. He's actually better against the run than he has been as a pass rusher, and that's dating back to Georgia, not only in the NFL in his short time. So he's still raw. But yeah, you don't need him to be a star in year 2, but you need him to be a credible part of that edge rotation. And he's got it. That would be my goal for Nolan Smith.
Have you seen anything from him in practice or in any of the moments you've been down there and have had an up close look at him to believe that he will take that type of step?
Well, no, because it's a passing camp. It's not about pass rush.
Yeah, I'm not talking about
it's
I'm talking about the whole body.
He dropped. They dropped the edge guys in coverage, and you can tell he's athletic. To me, when you talk about everybody they dropped in coverage, so we're talking about Bryce Hubb, Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham, Jelix Hunt, Terrell Lewis. I don't know how long Terrell's going to be here, and him, he's clearly the most comfortable dropping in that hook flat defender that Vic likes to use. But again, that's a curveball. And that's the only thing we saw in passing camp because it's not a pass rush. It's that it's not offensive line, defensive line oriented.
Yeah, I more meant the whole body of work that you've seen from him. Just anything up close in person. Have you seen any flashes? Have you seen, does he look like he can be a competent edge rusher in the NFL? I got to be honest, the eye test doesn't really lend great for Nolan Smith.
Well, he was hurt. I mean, people can believe it. They can't believe it. I mean, he was playing with a harness on his shoulder last year. If that shoulder's going to continue to be a problem, it's probably not going to work out. If they fixed it, it might work out. So a lot of it is on the medical part of it. Clearly, as the athleticism, that's not the be all end all. If it was, I'd have a lot of confidence in Devin White. It'd be easy if it's just about being an athlete. He's a great athlete. But there's more to it than that. Health is a part of it. But yeah, I'm surprised how many people have completely closed the door on him.
Thank you, Kevin Savard says, bless you. I did have a sneeze. Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate that, brother. John, how much will the pass rush impact the we're staying defense here. I'm going to just keep talking defense here for a little bit on Birds 365. We talked all about the pass rush just now. Obviously, it's connected with the coverage, the back end of the defense. How much are they expected to take a load off of the back end, or is it the other way around? I mean, if the coverage is better, then the guys up front have a better chance to get home. They're kind of go hand in hand, but you need both of them almost in a way. How much are you putting on that?
You definitely. That's my old buddy JG. Rush and cover and rush. Same thing. One can elevate the other, or vice versa. I think for years in Philadelphia, it's been the pass rush elevating the secondary because they've always had more talent up front than the back seven, and I think that's still the case, and that's why they're building the foundation on this defense on Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. That's where they're building the foundation of this defense, and they've gotten more talented in the secondary. We talked about that with Bill. Quignon's got talent. Cooper's got talent. Ringo's got a big upside. Rodgers looks like he's an NFL player. Reed, I think, maybe the most underrated player on this team. CJ, we know, can make plays if he's out there and if he's healthy. So they're better from a talent perspective, but there's going to be some growing pains with young defensive backs. There always is, especially in this defense, which is so complicated. So, we're going to be talking about expectations a lot because I think early in the season, on both sides of the football, more so offensively, but we're talking defensively because of the youth. People need to understand there's going to be some growing pains, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
John, we talked defensive line. We talked linebackers in the open of the show. We just talked a little bit about the back end there. Let's talk safeties now. What do you like the safety position for the Philadelphia Eagles? I think they need more. You seem to like Reed Blankenship, or maybe you don't, but at least you think the Eagles like Reed Blankenship. Do they need more at the safety room?
They could use a better backup safety, I would say.
You don't think it's a starter, though? You don't think it's somebody that can make Reed a backup?
No. I think they think Reed is a starting level player. I don't disagree with them. I think he's proven himself. With CJ, to me, the concerns are more about his durability. And I've been pretty consistent saying that Sidney Brown's going to be back, if not for week 1 or very early in the season. So I think that helps as well. But while I say that, he's also not going to have an off season as a young player. So he was out there every day during OTAs and minicamp that we were allowed in, watching practice, getting the mental reps, working off on the side field. So he's doing everything he possibly can, but he doesn't have those live reps as a young player, which I do think is a detriment. And that's where they have the cross training and Avonte Maddox also playing safety. And James Bradbury, if he's here, they're going to try him at safety, which I doubt he's going to be here. So they're trying some unique things to keep more bodies at cornerback where they have more depth. But they could use a better backup that you're more confident in. Because if you look at Avonte, people have been talking about Avonte at safety since his rookie season when Jim played him there because he was forced to because they had so many injuries. He didn't play that well at safety. And last year in that playoff game, he did not play well. Now, that was a really difficult spot for him because he had missed so much time with the torn pec. He had just come back and he was rusty at slot. And then all of a sudden, Reed gets banged up in week 18. We talked about AJ, and I'm not comparing the two players because AJ is the best football player on this team. But because AJ missed the Bucks game, I think people forget that Reed missed the Bucks game, and it showed up in a big way. And you talk about why do the Eagles think Reed Blankenship is a player? Because he missed 3 games last year, as Bill brought up, in his durability. But they were all different injuries. It was one game, one game, one game. And every time he left the lineup, you could see the difference when he wasn't out there, most notably in that Tampa game. So that's a part of the reason why they have so much belief in him as well. And so I'm not sold on Avonte as a backup safety. That's a long way of saying that. And for whatever reason, I think people think he's played well at safety. He is not. And then Cooper comes into it. Has barely played safety at Iowa. Hasn't got 1 rep at safety. I don't expect him to get 1 rep at safety in training camp. But when things whittle down to 53, he's so versatile. If injuries start to pile up, the Eagles will not hesitate to use him back there, I think, at that stage. So there's a bunch of different ways you can look at, but you got to bring in Justin Simmons crowd. I don't think that's happening. I just don't.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to go that route either, but I do wonder if they're going to, if not add to the room. I'm just interested to see what Howie does with the cornerbacks, because is he going to try and move a couple of them or Avonte and I guess James Bradbury to safety, and then you can keep more of them on the roster? I'm not really sure what they're going to do. I just don't think Howie's going to cut one of these young dudes, and I think safety is kind of a big part of that. That's why I don't think they're going to bring somebody.
Well, they've already moved 3 cornerbacks to safety. Avonte
right.
playing cross training. Mekhi Gardner, who's a corner by trade, is now a full-time safety. And he'll be in the mix for that 4th safety spot unless they bring somebody else in. Who am I missing? Bradbury, which didn't come into fruition because he hurt his oblique, or whether it was a conspiracy or not. And I don't think he's going to be relevant, but that's already 3 corners. And even Tristan McCullum, the Eagles signed him as a safety, but he was a corner in college. So they all have that versatility. I don't know how many more you're going to move to corner. To me, Ricks is the one guy. He's not going to move to safety. Can you find a spot for him on the 53? That would be the guy that you're haggling over. And that to me would be keeping Avonte as the 4th safety versus keeping Mekhi Gardner, say, as the 4th safety. So you could keep Eli Ricks as an extra cornerback. But you're so deep. I mean, in theory, those guys aren't going to play that much. Now, last year, because they had so many injuries, you never know. And that's why they have all these corners. But yeah, I think right now, if you force me to pick a 53, they're only going to keep 3 safeties to keep an extra corner. And with the idea that Maddox would be a versatile enough piece to be the 4th safety.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. How about one last question? Because somebody asked it in the chat, and it's something I've been thinking about, but I forgot to hit on it. And we've talked about it in the past a little bit, but defensive line depth, how bad do they need it? I mean, after not even talking about the edges, talking about after the big 3 of Jalen, Jordan, and Milton.
Yeah, somebody's got to step up, whether it's Marlon Tuipulotu, who the Eagles have liked for a couple of years now, or Moro Jomo. One of those guys has got to step up. Could be even PJ Mustafa if you want a more legitimate nose tackle type to back up Jordan Davis, because Jordan Davis is a guy, and we've talked about him a lot, and if he gets hurt, they have to change the way they play defense. Because they don't have a legitimate backup. So that to me, Marlon would be the second guy in theory, but talking about 340-pound run stuffer versus 305-pound guy who's going to get overpowered playing out of position, sort of like Javon Hargrave when he was trying to play nose tackle. So, I wouldn't sleep on him, PJ Mustipher. But yeah, the depth is not proven. So it's time for people like Marlon and Morrow to step up. I would say that. Oh, you're muted, Zander.
Yeah, my bad. So a pretty good breakdown on the defense there. We'll see what they end up doing at that position. Obviously, a lot of questions going into the 2024 season, especially on defense. Bill brings up those stats earlier on the show about how good you have to be, or at least how good most teams are when they go to the Super Bowl. So we really need a big jump from that defense this year, I think, to have a chance to compete and to go deep into the playoffs. So we'll see how.
Yeah, one real quick thing about Bill, because I meant to bring that up. When you put things in about, understand most of those teams have really good offenses too. So if you have really good offense, your defense is going to be better. So it's not necessarily a vacuum of, oh, they had a top 10 defense. Well, what was the offense? Is the offense keeping the defense off the field?
True.
A lot of people say, when they went to the Super Bowl, the defense wasn't as good as it looked on paper. Why? Because the offense was so good. And that is part of it. So, that's why it's a complementary game. And the better offense you have, the better defense generally you're going to have, unless you just stink to high heaven.
Well, that's absolutely true. And we're hard on the defense about last year. I always point to the playoff game, though. We put up 9 points versus the Bucs. I mean, offense wasn't great in that game. It would have helped the defense out a lot, probably, if they could move the ball and get less 3 and outs. So that's a big part of it as well, obviously, as you mentioned. Let's get to our commercial break. Coming up next, our first-time guest on the 800th episode of Birds 365, Thomas Mott, who does a great job on YouTube, has his own YouTube channel, The Thomas Mott Show. So I'm sure anybody in the chat has seen Thomas Mott on YouTube, because you guys are all obviously watching on YouTube. So thanks for being here. Stay tuned. Thomas Mott coming up next on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your greenhouse? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Up. And go Birds.
the greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Tuesday's edition of Birds 365, moving right along in the offseason, 35 days out from the Eagles report, and joined now by Thomas Mott, host of the Thomas Mott Show. Thomas, welcome to the show, man. Nice to have you on for the first time.
Only 35 days until training camp, guys. You think we can actually make it?
I think we can do it, Thomas.
Appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, good to have you, Thomas. Yeah, I don't know. Are we going to make it? I hope we're going to make it. It's tough to get through these low periods.
Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni.
Yeah, I figure we just do 2 straight hours of do Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts hate each other, and then we do it again tomorrow and for 33 more days. After that, right?
Unfortunately, but this is the thing. I think a lot of people criticize us, Thomas, when we do stuff, and a lot of Eagles, and I get it. You know, if you're an Eagles fan and you're upset, it's we didn't manufacture this. Those of us who were at the press conference, Martin Frank, buddy of mine, it admits, and it was a softball question. It was an easy answer, and Jeff McMullen reports that the key members of the organization, key figures in the organization, are upset by it. Disappointed was the word he used. That's what I got from one source who said, "You're creating needless speculation." That's what the quarterback did. We didn't do that. So why are we supposed to not talk about it? What are your thoughts?
No, I mean, I think we're obviously allowed to talk about it and should talk about it. I talked to Brandon Lee Gouton from Bleeding Green Nation. He was on my show last week. He was at the press conference that you were, and he said the same thing. It's a softball question. All you have to do is say, hey, Sirianni's been great. He's been in a bunch of different meetings, wearing a bunch of different hats. It's a good position for him. It's a good look, but he didn't do that. But I also think at the same time, has Jalen ever been super, gung-ho about any question asked by the media? He's not this media darling quarterback that's going to take a question and run with it and give you, 10 straight perfect minutes of sound bites that we can all cut up for our shows and put on the radio and go, man, he absolutely loves this person or that person. He's always, kind of short. It's kind of just by the book, business as usual. And I think we take a little bit too much into this. At the same time, though, Nick Sirianni is going to do what Nick Sirianni does this year, whether he has a big, giant, imprint on the offense or not. And whether Jalen loves him or not doesn't really matter as long as they win football games.
Well, that's true. One follow-up. Sorry, Zander.
Yeah,
to jump in. Because where I will say it's a little bit different, because I asked Jalen the question about, last time we talked to Jalen before this, he talked about being in sponge mode. He called it when he was talking about Kellen Moore's offense. So I asked him, are you still in sponge mode, or basically are you, verbalizing more of what you want with the offense? And that's when Jalen took it where he wanted to take it and said it was 95% new. So that became a thing, 95% new offense. So he can be intentional, and sometimes he is short, but if you get him talking, he can be intentional, and he will say things that he wants out there. In that 95%, Thomas, he wanted out there because the offense struggled during minicamp for the most part. So I kind of see both. He does. He could have, and that's why people were disappointed. He could have answered that question easily, as you just did. You said, "Oh, he's doing a great job," and move on to the next question.
Yeah.
Very, very simple. That's why I think it's a story.
No, it's a very fair point. I do think back to the fact that we all know Jalen Hurts, and a lot of people were unhappy with the coaching last year. I don't know if you know or anyone else knows if it was more hate towards Sirianni, more hate towards Brian Johnson. On the defensive side, was it Sean Desai, Matt Patricia? Like, we just don't know the true ins and outs of what all went wrong in terms of which coaches upset players last year. I just don't think Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie would have brought back Nick Sirianni if Jalen Hurts or some other prominent players hated the guy. Like if Jalen Hurts genuinely was like, I think Nick Sirianni is an idiot. He doesn't know offense. He's the reason why we collapsed last year. You really think that Howie would be like, yeah, but, he's a yes man. Let's just bring him back for another year. We'll figure things out whenever it gets there.
Potentially to protect themselves. I mean, if you fire Doug 3 years, and I brought this up on the show many times, if you fire Doug 3 years after the Super Bowl, after he brought you the pinnacle of the sport, something we've never achieved here in Philadelphia before Doug Peterson, you fire him because he wants his own coordinator, and then you move on from Nick 2 years after he goes to the Super Bowl. It doesn't really look good. But I do get your point. I mean, if Jalen didn't want him, I don't think they would have brought him back. But I also wonder if they're even willing to give Jalen that much lenience where they like to control and they're gonna take it, and that's how it goes.
It's possible. I mean, you give him $255 million, he's got to have some sort of say in terms of how the offense is structured. But still, I mean, we talk about these things that the Eagles are some sort of major dysfunctional organization that has these sort of problems every single year, and yet they have gone to Super Bowls. They've won a Super Bowl. They've moved on from this coach. They've moved on from that coach. It does feel like there is something going on behind the scenes. Is it big enough to make a massive deal of it once training camp starts? Probably not right now. 35 days out from training camp, sure. But I do think winning is going to solve all of the Eagles' issues. And if they get hot and they're 5-0, it'll just be like 2022 when, maybe Sirianni was the architect. Maybe it was Shane Steichen, but we didn't care because they won a bunch of games.
Water under the bridge. Yeah. Exactly.
Winning cures all ills. And I want to make it clear, I'm not saying Jalen Hurts dislikes Nick Sirianni.
Sure.
I don't know how you could dislike Nick Sirianni. I mean, he's one of those guys that everybody's going to get along with. So I don't think it has to do with that. I think the bigger aspect of it is, all right, because I think it's easy to blame coaches when things go wrong.
Yeah.
But I always say it's a talent first league, Thomas, good or bad. It's players first when it's good, like it was when the Eagles were going to the Super Bowl. It's players first when it's bad, like they were collapsing down the stretch. So to me, it's more about Jalen Hurts and Jalen Hurts' ability to bounce back to where he was in 2022. Whether those intangibles and being able to handle these types of situations are a big part of that, I don't know, but he seems a little bit frustrated moving on to this 95% new offense. Very early, what happens in June is not going to matter when they get to training camp. Any concerns from you that another change for Jalen Hurts is going to be a problem?
I mean, there's always concerns. I mean, everyone in the NFL, it's the age-old adage, that you change offensive coordinators, you got to reset. It's like learning a new language, and it definitely hurts young quarterbacks who are trying to figure out what to do in the National Football League. I think Jalen's upset with the fact that he starts off in 2021, or his first year being the full-time starter, and he's basically given this hybrid offense where it's like, run as best you can. We'll try and get some passes in there, but it was really just keyed towards let's try and win football games any way possible. They ran the ball like crazy up until, the playoff loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers where they were embarrassed. Then you bring in then year two in Shane Steichen, the offense gets opened up. He's running, he's throwing, he's looking like an MVP. And that's the year where we all go, okay, like we have something serious here. We have a quarterback who is not just going to be, a one-trick pony who can run around a little bit and make plays with his legs, but he threw the football very, very well. His accuracy dramatically improved. But then Brian Johnson's offense, and whether it was Sirianni or Johnson or a combination of the two, we don't know. But it felt like they kind of, pulled him back a little bit. I feel like Jalen has wanted to progress from 2021 Jalen to 2022 Jalen to suddenly 2023 Jalen, where he's supposed to be in the same conversation as Joe Burrow or maybe Patrick Mahomes or all these great quarterbacks that win from the pocket but also have mobility. But they kind of put the clamps on him last year. They barely threw to the middle of the football field, whether that's Jalen's fault or the coach's fault, who knows? It was a lot of very basic vanilla screen routes, jet screens, little 10-yard stops. There was no creativity at all. And I think Jalen got to the point halfway through the season where he's like, I'm not progressing. I'm not learning. I'm not getting to the point that I should be in my third year as a full-time starter. And we're losing a bunch of football games. And I'm now having to improvise to try to even, get us out of Seattle with a win, which they unfortunately weren't able to do. There were a lot more interceptions from that. So I think the frustration is there that he hasn't been able to grow through the first couple of years of his career, like a lot of other elite quarterbacks have been able to do. I think the hope is now with Kellen Moore, they're going to make him, and Kellen Moore especially is going to make him, hey, you're going to be a 100% full NFL quarterback. You're going to win from the pocket. You're going to throw across the middle. We're going to give you a ton of motion before the snap, the way you can see what the defense is doing, give you some pre-reads, give you some audible abilities at the line. And the hope is that eventually it's going to turn Jalen Hurts into the elite quarterback that we saw back in 2022. But that comes with the June, or I should say the May issues at OTAs with the interceptions. You were at training camp. I followed a lot of your coverage on Twitter. The offense, as you've said, was really, really bad. I expect that right now, but I think hopefully by November, we'll have the same Jalen Hurts we saw back in 2022.
Yeah, that's a good breakdown. How optimistic are you on Kellen Moore then, Thomas? Do you think he's the right fit for this job? I think you're right about what you said, where he's kind of the guy that might be able to bring back that full encompassing offense for Jalen Hurts. Do you like the hire of Kellen Moore?
I love the hire, but I've said it many times on my show. We have no idea. It's the same thing for draft picks, right? Oh, I love Quinyon Mitchell. Is Quinyon Mitchell going to be good? None of us have any clue if Quinyon Mitchell is actually going to be good. The same goes for Kellen Moore. You can go back historically. You like what he did with Dak Prescott. He had some really good years there. You like what he did kind of with the Chargers, although, Herbert is this really interesting guy that's kind of raised to a top 3 quarterback ability, doesn't always play to that level. He has injuries around him, so who really knows? But it feels like he at least has the experience to, again, make Jalen Hurts, or help Jalen Hurts is probably a better word, become a complete quarterback in the National Football League. Because you guys have covered the NFL for a long time. Complete quarterbacks win Super Bowls, right? These quarterbacks who have more of a running ability, or who have zero ability to actually move the football in terms of the middle of the football field or down the field. Any quarterback that has a deficiency somewhere usually doesn't win the Super Bowl in the modern NFL. There were guys in the early 2000s who did it, but in the modern NFL, you got to be a complete guy. And I think Jalen was as close to a complete quarterback as he possibly was in 2022. And Kellen Moore's entire job is to get him back to that level, because this is the best offense in football. Like on paper right now, what is it, June 18th here in 2024? There is not a better offense statistically and on paper than the NFL or than the Philadelphia Eagles. If Hurts plays top 5, top 8 quarterback type of play in the NFL this year, the offense will score 30 plus a game, and it shouldn't be a problem. But it's Kellen Moore's job to make sure we get to that point.
Good point.
I talk about the expectations a lot, Thomas, and you just kind of laid it out. Everybody thinks this offense on paper should be, the greatest show on turf again. I'm not at that point. And I certainly think the floor of this offense is very high. And by that, I mean, last year, people think it was awful, and it ended up number 8 in the NFL.
Right.
I think it's a similar floor this year. It's going to be a top 10 offense. But there's a big difference from 8, 9 to 1.
Yeah.
Number 1, never mind historical like the LA Rams, St. Louis Rams back in the day, or an offense like that. Boy, I think they're going to be closer to the floor than the ceiling. And there's one guy I focus on.
Yeah.
People think I dislike him. I like him a lot. He's a great guy. He's a great leader. He's a great person to have in the organization. But I have not seen the evidence that Saquon Barkley is who people think he is. And that was coming out of Penn State as the number 2 overall pick. He had one big season as a rookie with the Giants.
Yeah.
Then he had the torn ACL. And it's been, okay, he's a good player, not a great player. The Eagles have spun him. They've used the word special. Do you think he is a special player?
I do. And I understand the criticism, because if you go back and watch some Saquon Barkley film, especially with the New York Giants, he loses a lot of football games. That's, more towards the Giants. And there are times where he was shut down and the Giants offense was unable to move. But I do think that much like with the Eagles offense being ranked 8th in the league last year, you got to actually, use your eyes for an entire football game over the course of an entire season and gather more than just what stats say or, what, the actual numbers on paper actually do. The Eagles offense was 8th overall last year because they had moments where they were really good, especially early on in the season. But if you used your eyes and watched the Seattle Seahawks game and you watched the Arizona Cardinals game and both of those Giants games later on down the stretch, it was not a top 8 offense, right? The offense struggled incredibly in situational football. 3rd down and 3, and they're running some sort of dumb quarterback draw that gets nowhere. 3rd down and 10, they're running a 5-yard out or a little jet screen. Like, it just didn't make sense. And so while they were on paper the 8th best offense in the National Football League, our eyes all told us, and why Eagles fans got so mad at Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson, that it was like the 25th best offense in reality when you actually came down to in between the numbers playing football. I think Saquon's very similar. I think the stats will show you that he had one special season. The stats will show you that he's a very good running back. He's not elite. But I think the eyes in this offense are where a lot of us, including myself, are saying this can be a special running back, because the whole model of Saquon Barkley is after Christian McCaffrey. To me, the Eagles' entire plan is to go, okay, Christian McCaffrey, when the 49ers made that trade, it was too much money. McCaffrey's been injured too much with the Carolina Panthers. He's good. He's not great. And then he comes into a special offense with good play design, great quarterback play, and a really, really good offensive line. And he becomes probably the best weapon in the National Football League overall, at least touchdown-wise. I think Saquon can do the same thing. I don't know how, as a defense, you can game plan for the Philadelphia Eagles and go, okay, Jalen Hurts can run and throw. A.J. Brown's a top 3 wide receiver in the league. Devontae Smith's a top 10 wide receiver in the league. Goddard's a top 3 tight end in the league whenever he's healthy. And then you have Saquon Barkley. Like, what are you going to do? You double A.J. and let Saquon work in the middle? Or are you going to, load the box against Saquon and let A.J. be singled up on the outside? I think being on the Eagles is what's going to make him special. And even if he's not a top 3 running back, if he's a top 10 running back, and situationally he helps you with those 3rd down and 3s or get you that late touchdown that you need to get past the Cowboys or whatever, I think overall $13 million, whatever it is going to seem very, very cheap for his abilities.
Yeah, I love the way you broke down the situational. I think it's such a big part of it, and it adds to really what these players mean to the team is how you use them in certain situations.
And by the way, I agree with you, Thomas. I think that's where Saquon's impact is going to be. I think he's going to be a success if he can have impact on winning games, a play here, a play there. My concern is back to those expectations. People expect volume. They expect Christian McCaffrey numbers.
Yeah.
It ain't happening. That's kind of what I'm talking about. But if he helps you win games, I think that's best case scenario.
In terms of volume, sorry to interrupt you there. Do you think 1,300 yards rushing and 8 touchdowns is too little, too high? Like, in terms of your expectations for his numbers, where do you?
No, I expect Miles Sanders type. So 1269. I think Miles was at 1269. So 1,300. He's a better player than Miles Sanders. He's a better player than DeAndre Swift. But I think you're going to see similar numbers, especially in the passing game. I think that's where it becomes, and a lot of the rushing numbers will define by the Eagles' success. Are they ahead in the 4th quarter?
Sure.
Then those rushing numbers are going to go up. But Football Insights, I'll throw this at both of you guys because this scared the crap out of me. So if you look at the advanced stats since 2021, so this is not a small sample size. It was, rushing, forced missed tackles, so it necessarily isn't involved with the bad offensive line, and then scrimmage yards per touch. One of those charts where we have both ends of the spectrum. Saquon's in the bottom left quadrant where you don't want to be around names like Chuba Hubbard and Latavius Murray and Rachaad White, who doesn't have a lot of burst in Tampa Bay. And for those who say, well, that's crap, if you look at the top right of the quadrant, it's Christian McCaffrey, it's Nick Chubb, it's Jamar Gibbs, and a smaller sample size. It's Aaron Jones, it's Bijan Robinson. It's all the guys you would expect to be, but Saquon's not there. That's my concern.
Okay. I mean, it's a fair concern. I think, again, you got to point back to playing on the New York Giants and having Danny Dimes and Danny DeVito as your quarterback. There's not a lot of fear there in terms of,
Danny might have been better. Danny DeVito might have been better.
He might have been. He looked pretty good against us a couple of games there. It wasn't necessarily bad. I think that Philadelphia, when it's signing Saquon Barkley, like the reward is so high. The risk, truly though, it's pretty low. Like $13 million for a running back, people can freak out.
Oh, the risk I'm not concerned about at all. The money is not an issue to me. I'm just purely talking about the football impact and the expectations versus. And by the way, I think he's going to be a good player, a fine player, a Miles Sanders type player. Miles was good here. DeAndre was good here. I expect Saquon Barkley to be good here. I don't expect him to be special.
Okay.
That's my concern.
Okay. I mean, it's fair, but I think Saquon gives you a little bit more of an edge than a DeAndre Swift would. And I think his leadership, too, is something we've seen very little of. We've gotten very little over the past couple of, months from the Eagles, social media team showing us Saquon Barkley and stuff. Because I'm just a fan. I'm not at practices. I don't get to actually be up close and personal. But everything I've read, people I've talked to, the leadership is definitely there for Saquon Barkley, way more so than a DeAndre Swift or a Miles Sanders. And that alone, I think, especially during, a losing stretch, which will happen this year at some point, maybe they can, right the ship a lot faster than they did last year when they basically were unable to.
Yeah, John will vouch for that as well with the leadership of Saquon Barkley. Definitely has a lot of those intangibles. No denying that. Thomas, something you brought up about Kellen Moore that I want to follow up on. Do you have any concern with Jalen Hurts being able to grasp some of those things that you talked about? A lot of motion, throwing the ball over the middle, potentially getting the ball out to your running backs quickly. He hasn't really been great at that. It's not a knock on him. It's more just not really his style of quarterback. He likes to rely on the legs. He looks for the big play. He's a big play type of guy.
Sure.
Do you have any concern with his ability to grasp some of the things Kellen might ask him to do?
I think there's concern early on. I think if Philly comes out and puts up 18, 20 points against the Green Bay Packers on Friday, September 6th, and the offense doesn't look great, it's going to, freak everybody out. But I think it's going to take a little bit of time to learn these things. But I think if there is a quarterback who could learn to exactly what Kellen Moore wants him to do, it's Jalen Hurts. I think Jalen Hurts, for, all the, say, media flaws that we talked about earlier, not giving us the answers that we wanted, or not being as open with the media, not seeming really interested in his social life, being out in the public like we like our quarterbacks to do. We want to see what Patrick Mahomes is doing. We want to see what Tom Brady was doing back in the day. Jalen's very quiet. We have no clue what Jalen does, right now. What's he doing? I do think
non-football things.
Exactly. Non-football things. What's the answer? Right. I do think that he has the ability to learn this thing. And I think that the chip on Jalen's shoulder all the way back to Alabama has stayed there. And I think the NFL hasn't, fixed that. I think going to the Super Bowl didn't fix that. They lost the Super Bowl. I think there's still a lot of people in Jalen's mind that think Jalen Hurts is kind of a gimmick, kind of a one-hit wonder, kind of the result of A.J. Brown and Jason Kelsey and Devontae Smith. And I think this is the time where he can step into the role and be like, no, guys, I'm a top 5 quarterback. Like, I am a top 5 quarterback with the right offensive coordinator in this offense, in this system. I can go ahead and make things happen, and I can be extremely successful at this level. But I do think it is going to take time. I think all throughout training camp, I think, John, you're going to be tweeting Jalen Hurts interception, Jalen Hurts bad pass. Jalen Hurts' day wasn't that great. I think we're guaranteed to see that.
That's Elliott's job.
Elliott's job. Either way, we're going to see that. But I do think November is that kind of time where if the Eagles are hovering around, I don't know how many games November is in, 3-5, 4-2. November is where things start to really click, and that's where the run might start for the Eagles. So long-winded answer, but I do think he's going to be able to do it.
Defense. We haven't talked about defense. Vic Fangio. Everybody's excited about Vic, and they should be. He's got, the reputation, the cachet, whatever term you want to use. I think it's, kind of funny that Sean Desai would do. He was a direct Vic Fangio disciple, and he would do things as he was taught by Vic. And one of those things, Thomas, is he throws a lot at the players early.
Yeah.
And I think if you go back to training camp last year, the first time we all saw Bradbury in the slot, we we're like, what the hell is this guy doing? What is he doing? And it didn't work out. But if Vic does stuff like that, and everybody's like, oh, that's fine. And to that point, I bring up Quinyon Mitchell getting first team he's essentially the second linebacker on the field. If that were Sean Desai, Thomas Mott, you would have heard Philadelphia burning down. Vic Fangio, it's like, go do it, Vic. Great idea. And by the way, I'm completely fine with that. Vic knows what he's doing. How excited are you about this defense and their ability to bounce back?
Yeah, I think a lot of Eagle fans are very excited. I think we're very tired of the, young up-and-coming defensive coordinator in Philadelphia. Let's see if he can make it sort of mindset Philadelphia's had the past couple of years. I mean, Jonathan Gannon, again, goes back to stats versus what you actually see on the football field. Gannon's defenses were ranked pretty high. It was like, look, like top 10 defense, top 15 defense. And then the eye test, especially in the Super Bowl, especially, in some of those games late in the season, it's like, This doesn't look like a top 15 defense. It doesn't look like a top 10 defense. And yet we were continually gaslit saying, oh, it's, they're good. Statistically, they're very, very good. And I think Eagle fans are tired of trying to find the next great young defensive coordinator. I think when it comes to offense, makes sense. Go find the next Sean McVay. Go find the next Kyle Shanahan. When it comes to defense, go get a guy who's been there and done that. I did a show this the other day on Vic Fangio and talking about how his first defensive coordinator job was in 1995. It was the year before I was born. I didn't even exist in this world when he started coaching from an actual defensive coordinator position. And then now he has all the experience. He worked with Ray Lewis. He worked with those great, Niner linebacker groups and all those great secondaries in Denver. I think he just gives you the credibility that Eagle fans have been clamoring for from a defensive side of the football field. And I think the players have hinted that they wanted it too. And I know a lot of defensive players are very quick to not rip Sean Desai last year. I think Brandon Graham was the only person who's actually, actively told the media coaching was a little, a bit of a problem last year, which we all immediately go, Brian Johnson, and then obviously Sean Desai, whether it's true or not. But I do think that now you get an adult, quote unquote, in the room and somebody who's going to demand respect and demand a lot of these young players to do their job and do whatever it takes to get on the football field. And putting Quinyon at dime, I agree. It would have been weird last year. But in a cornerback room with 15 plus players all trying to make the roster and Quinyon being a first round draft pick, you just got to get him on the football field. And I think you would agree, OTAs and minicamp, a lot of it has been, let's just see who can play where. I mean, the Eagles have had massive issues at slot whenever Avonte Maddox goes down like the past 5 years. Quinyon can play slot because he's not going to be playing a lot of outside cornerback, it seems, with Ringo and Rodgers and Slay. Give him a try there, but I think the adult being back in the room on defense is going to help a lot of Eagle fans, especially, feel a lot more confident about the defense than, these random guys that we have to convince ourselves, oh, Sean Desai, well, he had a year in, Chicago. Maybe he'll actually be good. Now it's like, here's the resume of Vic Fangio. Just duplicate that in Philadelphia and you'll be just fine.
Thomas, last question for me. Thanks for joining the show, man. You were awesome. We appreciate you being here. First appearance on the show. It's our 800th show of Birds 365. So making our way. I think we'll get through the next 35 days. We've gotten through the last 800. What do you make of the young corners, Thomas? They were the talk of the camp. They were the talk of the spring football. A lot of young guys stepping up. Cooper DeJean's obviously still out there. It seems like his name's kind of fallen out because there's so many other young guys stepping up. What do you make of the young corners and the headlines surrounding them?
It's hard, right? Again, I'm reading John's tweets. I'm reading ESP's tweets. I'm reading Brandon Lee Gouton's tweets in terms of what they're seeing actually being on the sideline at training camp, like most Eagle fans are, because you guys aren't allowed to film 11-on-11s and 7-on-7s. So we take your word for it whenever Quinyon looks good or this player doesn't look good. I think, again, it's a breath of fresh air actually having cornerbacks. And Darius Slay, I think, is going to be your leader. And then after that, it's going to be a massive cluster to figure out who's number two. To me, it sounds like Keely Ringo is probably going to be number two. I wouldn't count on Isaiah Rodgers. They both got a lot of first-team reps, according to John, again, at training camp or at minicamp and OTAs the past couple of weeks. I think Quinyon is going to just get to sit back and learn. I think his entire job is to be a sponge, and his entire job is to be the future this year, not to be the guy this year. And if he gets called in and needs to play, then, get out there and play. But I don't think there is any pressure for Quinyon Mitchell, for instance, to have to start right away or have to contribute right away. I think that if Ringo's ready to go, Rodgers, Slay, you are going to be just fine. I think DeJean is going to get a little more pressure to play just based on the fact that he can kind of move around a little bit more. I think they're going to use him in the nickel a bunch. I think they're going to have him in dime packages. Can he play a little bit of safety as well at times? Who really knows? It's just, again, so refreshing to have hope at the cornerback slot. I mean, my entire 28 years on this earth, Philadelphia's had a couple of good years where they had good cornerbacks, right? I was really young with Lito Shepherd and Sheldon Brown. I remember the Asante Samuel, 2009, 2010 years. Those were nice. But then we've had a bunch of, misses. Byron Maxwell was like, oh, look how much money we gave Byron Maxwell. Nandi Asamoah. All these players were supposed to be good. Darby had his time. Jalen Mills had his time. We haven't had consistent, strong cornerback play out of Darius Slay for a very long time. And I'm pumped to see what happens, but I'm very curious to see what happens with James Bradbury if he's going to be on the roster or playing safety or, I don't know, playing cornerback. It's going to be interesting.
Well, 2022 was pretty special.
Sure.
And that's the thing. I kind of feel like modern NFL cornerbacks are like baseball relievers. They have a good year, down year, good year.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to have that consistency. And that's one of the reasons I have so much respect for Slay. He's been one of those guys who's pretty consistent year in and year out. But you have to start worrying about the age there. At Real Thomas Mott, make sure you follow Thomas on X. Did a great job here on his debut with Birds 365. I hope you'll come back. I hope it wasn't that bad for you, Thomas. Watch his show on his YouTube channel. You can check it out there. I really appreciate it.
Hey, guys, thanks for having me on. Congrats on the 800th show, and let's have fun the next 35 days. Let's enjoy, a little less drama until the drama really starts on, July 23rd.
Appreciate it, Thomas. Thanks for joining the show, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Thanks, Thomas Mott joining us from the Thomas Mott Show. Does great work on his YouTube. Everybody who's watching on YouTube, I'm sure you know or have seen one of Thomas's videos and watched them on YouTube as he is growing like a weed on YouTube, doing a great job. So good stuff from Thomas Mott. Johnny Mac, we got about 6 or 7 minutes left to play. I got one more question for you. We'll do it after the commercial break. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. There's a lot of good people in here this morning, so we appreciate all you guys for being in here. Almost 300 of you on YouTube and plenty of others on our other social platforms. So make sure you guys drop a like as it helps us grow, so we appreciate it. 800th show, guys. Can we get a bunch of likes? Can we get 200, 300 likes for the 800th edition of Birds 365? Stay tuned, everybody. Birds 365 will be right back to wrap up this Tuesday edition.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Wrapping up this Tuesday edition of Birds 365. Thanks, everybody, for being here this morning. Johnny Mac, just a couple minutes left to go on this 800th episode of Birds 365. I wanted to ask what you thought of Thomas Mott talking about Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I just, I think people should temper their expectations.
He brought up the Christian McCaffrey, and I was waiting for Johnny Mac's head to explode.
Well, like I said, I brought up the football, and that's a large sample size. And if for people that say that doesn't mean anything because of the Giants supporting cast, again, the stars are where they're supposed to be, and he's arguably where he's supposed to be, because forced missed tackles is going to give you that credit for forcing a missed tackle. It's not contingent on anybody else except you. So it's a concern. But he's a good player. People misunderstand, because if you constructively criticize anybody and they're a fan, they tend to get upset by it. He's a good player. Like Miles was a good player, like DeAndre was a good player, but I think you're going to see some of the faults, unfortunately, as the real bullets start to fly. But yeah, he did a great job. You can tell why his YouTube show is popular. And then I will say, more than Saquon, because nobody agrees with me on Saquon, because he was the number 2 overall pick. It always amazes me where I think Thomas used the term gaslit to say the 22 defense was a good defense, the 2022 defense. Like, we're trying to convince fans that there's a good defense. I don't give a flying hoot who thinks something's good or bad. I just give you my opinion. But B, I would say they were in the Super Bowl. I can't wrap my head around this, Zander. They were in the Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And yes, if you look at the history of every top 10 defense, when they're playing the best offense or one of the best offenses or an historic offense with one of the greatest coaches of all time versus and one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, you can say that already about Patrick. You tend not to play as well as you play against the poor teams, the 4 or 5 win teams that get you. But they were a damn good defense in 2022 with 70 sacks and all the turnovers and all the placings. Yes, did they get caught by, again, a dynasty level team? Yes. But they lost. How close were they in that game?
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with the defense. I'm with you on this, John.
They were in the Super Bowl.
Well, John, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the thing you always say with play calling. You say people don't judge play calling, they judge play results.
Yeah.
Now, I'll take you back to 2017. Tom Brady threw for over 500 yards on us in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
We won the game, though.
Yeah.
So nobody, if the flag doesn't get thrown and Jalen gets the ball back and we win the game, Jonathan Gannon's the greatest defensive coordinator we've ever had in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
But
and by the way, Jim Schwartz is still pissed about that game.
I know he is, but we won. And
yeah,
that's, it's perceived in a different light. But I do agree with you. I have actually the
if we're at the point, and I've said this many times on these 800, if we're at the point where making the Super Bowl is not an accomplishment, I can't help you. That is one hell of an accomplishment. Is it disappointing you lost? Of course. But, is that, that was a really good defense. Nobody's gaslighting anybody.
Yeah, as what I was about to say is the further we get away from that year, the more my distaste for Jonathan Gannon shrinks. I've almost come full circle where I think he was great. I mean, I know he had his problems. Something he did wrong. I get that, but this is the NFL. Nobody's going to do everything right. And with the personnel he had, and
I thought people would kind of come off there. They just don't like the guy, which is ironic because, again, if you met him, you're going to like him.
Well, know what people didn't like is the whole thing at the end. He's like, I'm not going anywhere in the press conference in the playoffs, and we're going to go.
At that time, he thought he was going nowhere.
Yeah.
At that time, I was
I guess
talking
he didn't
to him.
lie, yeah.
I was talking to him after the NFC Championship game. Trust me, he did not think he was going anywhere. And then the call came, and that was the problem. The call came, and Monty Ossenfort called him to congratulate him for winning the NFC Championship game. So when he was talking to John Clark, yeah, the Eagles thought he was coming back. He thought he was coming back. In fact, Jeffrey Lurie is going to make him one of the highest paid defensive coordinators in history to come back. Yeah, everybody thought he was coming back. That was not a lie. That was not remotely a lie. And the Eagles don't even try to sell that. Everybody thought he was coming back. And then they won, and he would have been back if they lost the NFC Championship game, but they won. And Monty Ossenfort made the call. It happens. But yeah, I thought people would recognize it a little bit more. And I know we got to get out of here. We're late, but after what happened last season, but they, if they don't like a guy and they picked him out as the reason they lost the Super Bowl, it's not going to change.
That'll do it for today's edition of Birds 365. I thought it was a good 800th show. I thought we had a new guest in, which was good. Thomas Mott, thought he was excellent. He does great work over on his YouTube, so make sure you guys go check out his YouTube channel. And then hour one, it was good to have Bill Colarulo back from his wedding and from his honeymoon and all those things. We got a little bit cut short with Bill, but we'll get him back next week, and we'll have hopefully a full segment with him then. So good 800th show. I hope all of you in the chat, whether you love me or hate me or love John or hate John, I hope you drop a like on the show so we can set an 800th show record. Let's do it, everybody. Thanks for being here this morning. Johnny Mac, great show today. We'll be back tomorrow. Good stuff, Johnny Mac.
Yeah, 8:01. Tune in.
8:01. See you tomorrow, everybody.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate, inside the locker room, and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.